Cyprus, the Counterintelligence podcast, hosted by IXN Solutions, the company you turn to for corporate counterintelligence expertise and creators of 351X.
And we're live. Dave Turner, good evening, my friend. How are you doing?
Good evening. It's pretty rare we do these in the evening, but yeah, it's great to see you and really excited about today's show.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited about it as well. Dave, so I was doing a little bit of news reading this morning and I came across an article that was dated the 16th of January of this year. So really last Friday, the security services of Ukraine, the SBU, ended up disrupting a GRU operation where the GRU agents, two of them, were trying to carry out a bomb attack using a drone. Counterintelligence on the battlefield at its finest is it disrupted a function of counterintelligence. Two bad dudes trying to do bad things to the Ukrainian positions around Odessa.
Yeah, I read up on that because you told me you were going to bring it up during this podcast. So, it's another great example of a couple of GRU officers doing bad things in a combat zone, and counterintelligence coming out on top again, because that's what we're supposed to be doing out there, right? Trying to figure out what the enemy's doing, and they probably saved a lot of lives. Certainly in the Odessa area. It's kind of interesting that, drones are now the IEDs of, from our time in Iraq and some of those areas. It's a different ballgame now with these drones. They're probably $500 drones versus, versus other capabilities. So it's a really interesting combat environment, and counterintelligence doing their part is always something good to read.
I agree. And Dave, I think through our career, we heard several times, and it was different services out there and agencies. Counterintelligence doesn't need to be in a combat zone. This clearly illustrates the opposite. Drones are now the new IEDs, the VB IEDs that we faced in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're cheaper, they're faster, their payload's just as effective. Boy, and now we've got to look up. This counter UAS that's going to need to happen for our counterintelligence agents out there to be savvy with it. You now need to. It's a four-dimensional chess match now. These UASs, boy, it's going to be interesting as we move forward.
No, I agree. Combat is changing significantly. I think the days of sitting on a fob and doing those things are over now. I think we're getting rid of armor, we're getting rid of tanks, we're getting rid of those types of things. It's a whole new ball game. So whoever adjusts best wins. Figure out. Hopefully that's us.
Yeah, I agree, Dave. Before you intro our guest, let's just give a shout out to the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, rolling up two GRU officers. Hope they rot in a cell, trying to do damage to those individuals in Odessa. It's a new battlefield. Y'all did a great job of collecting and disrupting, because that is a counterintelligence function, these bad dudes. But Dave, I digress. Why don't you do an intro?
All right. Well, again, as I said at the beginning, I'm really excited about our guest today. So Ken Keppler is somebody I've known for quite some time. We certainly lost track over the years, but it's a real pleasure, Ken, to have you on the show. And just wanted to kind of set this up for you a little bit. So you and I actually go back quite a ways. We were both Army captains in the 902nd MI group in the 1990s. I was out at Rock Island. I think you were at Aberdeen, or were you at Aberdeen, Ken? Yeah. That's right.
Yep.
That's right. So we kind of share that counterintelligence foundation. So I'll have some questions about that later. But for our listeners, Ken has one of the most credible counterintelligence and investigations careers you'll find. He served as an Army MI and CI officer, then spent more than 2 decades with the FBI, where he worked counterintelligence operations, investigations in the field, supervised major CI programs, served in senior leadership roles, and ultimately supported national level CI integration and policy efforts on joint duty assignments with the ODNI and the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. After that, Ken transitioned into the private sector, leading financial crime investigations and risk functions, including oversight at a major bank, before moving into congressional oversight as a senior advisor on the House Judiciary Committee, including supporting a high-profile investigative task force. So clearly, today's conversation really can go across a wide spectrum, maybe the most wide spectrum I've seen from a counterintelligence person. You kind of have that on-the-ground experience, and you have some national level experience, and then you get into the oversight aspect of this. So without further ado, I think what we'd like to do now, Ken, is just kind of have you, give us a little bit of summary of your career, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to talk to fellow CI professionals. It's a career field that we all deeply love very much. So I started out. I enlisted in the Army when I was 17, and I was in the reserves for 4 years when I was in college. And I started out in a PSYOP unit, and then when I transferred down to Kentucky to go to college, I ended up in a armor company with 100th Division training, and our mission was to train armor crewmen over at Fort Knox. That was our wartime mission. It would backfill the armor center as everyone else went out. So and that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a tanker. That was like my dream. I had General Patton all over the wall in my bedroom as a kid, and Stonewall Jackson, Grant, the whole 9 yards. But armor was like where I wanted to be. And the Army, in their infinite wisdom, when I first got commissioned and went on active duty, they branched me Medical Service Corps, and I just could not believe I call it bad luck, but as it turned out, it was pretty cool. I was a med platoon leader, 215 infantry over in 3rd ID in Schweinfurt. And I love my medics. I grew to love my medics, and it was a great experience for a guy with a history degree and a German degree to be in charge of a bunch of medics and PAs. But it was a rewarding experience. I got solid leadership time doing that. And then when I got back to the States, I went to Fort Belvoir for a few years. That was right during the spin up on the first Gulf War, and I was put in charge of medical mobilization down at AP Hill during that period of time. But after that was all over, I decided to branch transfer to MI. And so I got back over to more of the warfighting side of the house. And I was blessed to be able to go to MI branch. And I went out to Huachuca for my transition and advanced course. And it's there I decided I wanted to get into human. So I put in for CI training, the 35 Echo track before I got orders. Well, Branch told me, "Hey, we got a deal for you. You're new to MI, so you need to get MI tactical time. If you're willing to go to Korea for a year, we'll give you guaranteed CI training with a guaranteed CI follow-on assignment in 902nd." So that's what I did. My wife was an officer too in the Army, and she knew how the game was played. So she's like, "Look, if this is what you got to do to make your bones in your new career field, I back you." So I ended up going to 2ID for a year as an EW officer. I was actually the EW staff officer for the Seaweed Battalion in 2ID. And I did that, came back to 902nd, and that's where I met Dave, and did that for about 2 years. And I ETS'd and got out of the Army 96, went on terminal leave and started as a contractor for about, I don't know, 6 months till I got orders for the Bureau. I had applied to the Bureau before that. And I got out and started at Quantico on June 30th of 97. Went through the FBI Academy. It was 16 weeks back then. It's over 20 weeks now. I don't know why they added so much time to it, but nevertheless, that's what they did. And after training, I got my first office assignment with Chicago, which was fortuitous in a way because I grew up there, and I wasn't asking to go to Chicago, but the Bureau decided, hey, you need to go to Chicago. So I went to Chicago, spent 7 years there during the 9/11 event. And I was, right when you got to Chicago, you went to a new agent squad for 6 months, and you got to rotate through all the different squads in the division. And you got to, get a sense of what the FBI is like and all the different, violations that they investigate. Then at the end of that 6 months, you got to put in your top 3 choices of what squad you wanted to go to. And I put in for the two CI. We had two CI squads there at the time. One was a global squad. One was a PAC Rim squad. We called it. It covered all the Chinas, the Taiwan, the Koreas, and I went to the global squad. So from day one in the bureau, I was lucky enough to get on a CI squad, which, as it turned out, it really wasn't that hard to get because most agents don't want anything to do with counterintelligence. They run for the hills on that stuff. I don't know if you guys have heard that about the bureau, but most agents have no interest in working CI. I did. That's why I joined the bureau, is to work CI. That's all I ever wanted to do. I fully respect my criminal colleagues. I mean, they do incredible work. That bureau's outstanding at doing criminal investigation uh, across the board. But that's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a counterintelligence officer, so agent. So that's where I ended up. I ended up working on the global squad. We covered everything, like I said, but PAC Rim countries. So I worked Iran, a lot of serious stuff, a lot of Iraqi stuff. And then I dabbled in some Cuban stuff. They made me the Cuba guy for the squad. Not a lot of Cuba work in Chicago at the time, but I was the guy that covered it when we ever had, targets coming into our AOR, is what we call area of responsibility. I was the guy that worked all that stuff. So got a flavor for everything, pretty much. Did a little Russia stuff, but I was real heavy Middle East, Cuba. Spent 7 years there, and then I got a specialty transfer for CI to the Pittsburgh office in 2004. And because they back then they used to do specialty transfers to inject experience from larger field offices into a smaller office to energize their CI program. So I went over to Pittsburgh and spent '04 to 2013 there. And I got back into mostly Iranian work. And I'll back up a little bit. I fell in love with DA ops in Chicago. That's where I really fell in love with recruitments and ops. And that's, espionage cases are cool, but I really, really like espionage. I mean, operations and working source recruitment. So I got into it in Chicago, ran some ops there. And then when I transferred to Pittsburgh, I started looking around at what I could do in Pittsburgh. And a lot of my friends in Chicago were like, "You're insane for going there. There's not anything to do out in Pittsburgh. There's no establishments, consulates or embassies. What are you going to do out there?" And I said, "Well, I'll find something to do." And lo and behold, man, there was tons to do in Pittsburgh. Wherever you have major league universities, um, not a huge immigrant community for a lot of stuff, but we do have a sizable, Chinese population here. People coming in and out all the time, foreign students and so forth. And so I got into working a lot of that stuff at that point too. So I got in doing some ops again in Pitt, and then after in 2007, the squad supervisor transferred to Pittsburgh, and nobody from headquarters put in for the CI desk, supervisory desk in Pittsburgh. The SAC came to me and said, "Hey, do you want the CI squad?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll take it." I'd been a case agent for about 11 years at that point, so I felt I had enough under my belt to be able to pass on, experience and so forth to newer agents and run a squad. So I had a great teacher in Chicago. My first supervisor, Don Lachey, was fantastic, and he brought us up to be great FBI supervisors. And so we, a bunch of us ended up becoming, more senior guys in the management world. So yeah, I did that till 2013, and then I was called by a friend from Chicago who was at headquarters at the time, and asked me if I'd be interested in taking over the unit chief job for PRC espionage at headquarters. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do it. I needed headquarters time, and I wanted to go to Hoover, so I ended up going to to the Hoover building, and was there, and I ran that unit for about a year and a half, It's usually the tour that we had at the time, and I ended up doing that, and then I went back to Pittsburgh and did did a short stint there as I was putting my ASAC packet together, because that was the next step up in the rung. So I put in my ASAC packet, and I started putting in for some ASAC jobs around the area. And lo and behold, I got lucky and I got into Cleveland. So I went to Cleveland as an ASAC, and I ran the national security branch there. And I had supervisory duties over the Toledo RA, which was pretty much all criminal. We had some CT stuff going on there, overflow from Detroit coming on down, but mostly crimes against children, drugs, so for, a lot of drugs, a lot of drug work. Had two supervisors in Toledo that were fantastic, and they did wonderful work and made my job a lot easier. But so I ran the national security branch, CTCI, over in headquarters city that we call it, over in Cleveland. And then towards the end of that, I was starting to look at my age, and I was realizing I was getting to be an old man. And so I I decided I didn't want to be an SAC when I grew up at that point. I wanted to get back to counterintelligence and purely. And so my good buddy Tom Ferguson, who was my old buddy from Chicago, we'd been working together we still work together for everything. He was on the Hill with me just recently, and then he just left. But he called me up. He was over at ODNI already, and he said, "Hey, they're looking for a new assistant director of this directorate over at NCSC, National Counterintelligence Security Center, to run a joint shop where we attempted to leverage OFCO community wide in support of National Security Council initiatives." And it sounded cool. So it was a joint shop with agency, DoD guys, from all the services, and some bureau guys. And it was a fantastic job. I never worked with so many wonderful people in my life, who really had a real passion for counterintelligence. So I put in for it. I got it. Went over to NCSC, worked for Bill Evanina for about 2 years, almost 2 years. And that took me up to beyond retirement. And then I decided it was time to get home to my family, because I had been a part-time dad for about a decade. You guys are familiar with all that kind of stuff. And so I went back, and I retired at that point, and went back to Pitt and worked at a bank, working in anti-money laundering investigations. And then that was about four and a half, almost 5 years there. Then I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. So I got an opportunity through an old bureau friend, that the Hill was looking for two old retired guys from the bureau to come to the Judiciary Committee and help them look at some issues that were going on with the bureau at the time. This was in 2023, and so yeah, I got that, and I went over to the Hill and worked with Tom again. And we were basically, serving as advisors about the bureau, because, Congress doesn't know anything about the bureau, the inner workings of the bureau. And so we like to think we helped them out, steering them the right way, and also being, objective, being objective about issues going on with the bureau. I mean, we knew bureau had some issues going on. You guys are all familiar with what happened with all the Russiagate stuff, but at the same time, the bureau continues then and now continues to do great work. And you know, a few bad guys, messing stuff up, doesn't necessarily mean the whole operation's broke. So that's the attitude we took to the whole job. So, and that's where I am today. I'm still on the Hill, still work on the Judiciary Committee, on assisting on bureau things.
Hey, Ken, first of all, thank you for your almost 3 decades of service there. It sounds like, good Lord, you've done everything from the Army to the Bureau to working in a bank and now on the Hill. Good Lord, that's a lot to cover. But I want to go back to your early Army days, if you don't mind, Ken.
Yeah,
So
sure.
here you are. You're in Korea. You've just been trained CI human out of Fort Huachuca. What were those early years like as a counterintelligence professional? Why did you want to continue and persist on within that career field?
When I was at the advanced course, one of the guys, I can't remember his name anymore, but he was one of the MICEPs. He came out from Hanover, and he gave us the whole human pitch about, the human part of the Bureau, or I mean the Army. And I was just like, this is what I want to do. I'm not a techie guy. I have a history degree, for crying out loud. I don't even fit in this new world anymore. I mean, I talk to people, that's what I do. Um, that's the only skill set I believe I ever had that was worth a damn in this world. And so after that presentation, I was like, I want to do human. And so, if great skills program that you guys are familiar with, I was very, very interested in that. And so that's why I went to my branch manager. I don't know if you guys remember General Nakasone, but I worked with Paul Nakasone as a captain in Korea. We were captains together in 102nd MI Battalion. But Paul was our branch manager at the time over at branch. And I went and talked to him, and I said, "This is what I want to do, Paul." And he's like, "Okay." So, he got me rigged up. I was supposed to go to the farm at right at the end of my Army life, and then I got orders for the Bureau, and I decided to go to Bureau. But nevertheless, I got really into the whole idea of doing human. It really sounded really cool. I mean, I was doing electronic warfare stuff, planning and ops planning, war planning in Korea, but the human stuff just always really intrigued me. Like I said, I like talking to people. Uh, I consider myself fairly well read. I'm a huge history buff. You can see all my Civil War stuff behind me, but um, I just love talking to people from all different cultures and having been abroad, lived abroad. It was just, I don't know, I thought it was just a really good fit for me and something that really appealed to me. So that's why I pursued the whole human route, counterintelligence.
I love that you went CI and human, but let me ask you this, right? So now you've ETS from the Army. You're a contractor. You wanted to do human. Why didn't you go with the agency?
Well, actually, when I got out of the Army, I applied to everybody. I shotgunned the whole crowd. I applied to agency, bureau, DEA, and state to be a dip security guy. And I passed the interview for DEA, and and I never heard from them again. I applied to the bureau. Um, I applied to, like I said, I passed the interview for state. They said we'll put you on a waiting list for a year, and if we don't contact you, then we don't want you. So fine, that was fine. I don't care. And and the agency got back to me. They offered me a position working adjudications on security clearances. I'm like, no, that's not something I want to do. Um, so I passed on that. And lo and behold, the bureau came through, and that's how I ended up in the bureau. Like I said, I knew it was going to be challenging. I mean, at the time, I mean, there were thousands of people applying to the bureau. It was a big hiring binge going on with the bureau at the time. They were putting a class through Quantico every other week, starting a new class in the mid '90s, and so um, it was competitive. How I got in, I still don't know, but I did. And but my idea was I was going to go with whoever offered me a job first. That was my attitude about it. And look, thank God the bureau offered me something before everyone else because they do counterintelligence, and that's what I really, really wanted to do. I got a call from the DEA recruiter 2 days before I was about to graduate from Quantico. And he's like, "Hey, you need to get down to Quantico for your PT test." And I said, "I'm about to graduate from the FBI Academy." I go, he's like, "God damn it." He goes, the applicant coordinator had left all these applications in an inbox somewhere and never processed them. So, but hey, nothing against the DEA. they're righteous guys. I worked with a lot of them in Cleveland. Dear friend of mine, Keith Martin, God bless his soul, was a colleague of mine at the time as an ASAC, and we worked some joint drug stuff together, and they do amazing work, those guys. But the bureaus, I ended up where I needed to be.
Well, good thing for the Bureau then. At least they didn't lose your packet in an inbox someplace. So bad luck for DEA. Hey, Ken, so you've seen counterintelligence from almost every angle, right? Army, FBI field, FBI headquarters, ODNI, NCSC. You've seen some corporate things. Now you have kind of a vision into how Congress works and some of that oversight responsibility. So if you had to define what effective counterintelligence actually looks like in practice, what do you think it requires? What do you think goes into that?
Well, first and foremost, it requires some passion and some willingness to work beyond 9 to 5, 7 days a week. I used to tell my agents on my squad when I was a supervisor, I said, if you guys are going to work this 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, you're never going to get any results. You have to be willing to really throw a lot into this and work it whenever you have to. And being a history buff maybe impacts this a little bit with me, but I really, really believe that to be a good counterintelligence officer, you need to study past case histories. You need to really have an appreciation for, because all this has been done before. I used to have guys come in new to the program, and they'd have all these really wild ideas and blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, look, all this has been done before. I go, you need to educate yourself on the history of this stuff, because the Bureau, the military, MI5, MI6, all those guys have done amazing. If you haven't read I used to require them to read the double cross system. That was a required reading for me because it was case studies, right? It's a how-to guide on how to run double agents, you have to get trained, obviously, too. I mean, we have to train our new guys. But I always used to encourage these guys to educate themselves on the on the whole history of things that have been done great and things that have been done wrong. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have gone sideways in this business, and we can learn from that. And so those are things that I really think are important from looking at it broadly across the entire intelligence community. And we talked about this at dinner, Dave, but I really think that, we're at a point now where the U.S. counterintelligence needs to be less siloed. I really, really, after having been in the Bureau and when I was over at ODNI, I had a chance to step out of the Bureau and look at it from the outside a little bit. And I just really became, and I may be wrong. I know a lot of my Bureau colleagues, may wrinkle their nose at it, but I really think there needs to be more interoperability and more, working together on this stuff, because, everyone's working in their own little worlds. And, the Bureau can bring things to the table. The military can bring things to the table. The agency can, and the other members of the IC. All this stuff has potential in really furthering the CI mission. And not working jointly, I think, is a real handicap in our current CI posture across the board. And so I would like to see more, more interoperability between all the CI executives that are out there. And having more strategic vision on this stuff versus just, hey, we just rolled up a spy. Okay, great. Okay. Putting a bad guy in jail, putting Aldrich Ames or Bob Hansen in jail, obviously is a win. They need to go to jail. But the thing that concerns me is that, about espionage cases is that we've already lost at that point. We already got our clock cleaned, and so, less emphasis on, I think there needs to be more of an emphasis on recruitments, even though, they're difficult. They don't come around all that often, really good ones. But nevertheless, we need to continue to try to do them and target and recruit, bad guys. And so people in place or get them to defect or whatever, but you got to get them to, we got to get guys on the books that are giving us the information our policymakers need. So yeah, boy, Dave, that's a big question, but those are things that just come to my mind right away, and so forth. When it comes to what it takes to really make this a good thing. And when it comes to the Bureau, a lot of agents get assigned to CI squads. And like I said, a lot of agents, most of them don't want to work CI, and they go kicking and screaming to the CI squad. And while they're there, getting results out of those guys is very difficult sometimes. Of course, it takes good leadership, and I had a lot of agents come to my squad that were former crim guys that ended up really liking it, because I like to think I brought the passion and the leadership to the mission and made them, got created the conditions and the atmosphere where they grew to like this stuff. But it was hard. It was hard to do that with FBI agents, working counter intel. So yeah, from a bureau perspective, that was a challenge we always had, was trying to build programs with agents that wanted to be there and wanted to work that beyond 9 to 5. Not saying they don't work. They the crim guys only work 9 to 5. They don't. Those guys work incredibly long hours as well. But my point is that you get the point. You just really have to put more time into it than just because, CI, you have to be proactive. It's not going to come to you like a bank gets robbed, someone's dealing drugs on the street corner. I mean, it's not hard to see this stuff, but when it comes to CI, finding those elusive targets in the weeds is, identifying the targets is a big chunk of the battle. Then you
Yeah.
can figure out what you want to do with them.
Sure. Yeah, and you're right. It's a big question. And, Ken and I, we were able to have dinner together back in December when we were back teaching a CI ops course in the DC area. And we talked about this as well, but I just want to follow up real quick. One of the things we talked about was the Secure Act and kind of the ability to have a national level CI capability, and how important that is. And we all agreed that night, but I'm definitely interested in kind of hearing your perspective on, how important is it to have national level CI capabilities, and as you said earlier, not be siloed in our efforts in this.
Again, I might any bureau guys that might hear this, I might be like, oh, he's selling us out. But I really don't think anybody has to sell themselves out and their equities and their and what they're charged to do. But that I read your article, Dave, and I really liked it. You made some awesome points in that paper that you wrote, and the biggest key to me is with the Secure Act is again that getting everyone out of their silos and working together, and of course there's going to be some things that are compartmented, that to satisfy military requirements or an espionage case over at the Bureau, whatever. But what I saw, at least sitting over at the Bureau, and after going over to OD&I, I came to believe that we didn't have a strategic vision for CI, and we always used to talk about, a lot of my friends and I would be like, we're not keeping the MSS awake at night. We're not. These guys. Okay, so we took one of their guys off the board, or we took Hansen off the board. Okay, great, that's all good, but what we need to step up our game to where we are doing things in the CI side of the house that really cripples their ability to target and steal our most sensitive secrets, and it goes beyond CI, right? I mean, it's like a lot of this stuff is with policies too, and so we need to also bring in people from the policy side, who can, in other agencies, with whether it's State Department, Congress, or whoever, to help us, come up with more laws or policies that will, put a crimp in these guys. Like guys used to lament all the time about the Iranian nuclear program. I'm going back several years now, but they'd be crying about how the Iranians are building nukes. And I was like, well, who educated them how to do it? We did. The British did. The West educated all their top nuclear scientists. Okay. If we're that concerned about the Iranians building a nuke, well, why are we allowing all these young Iranians to come over here and study in our top university? And so I think it needs to be a whole government effort, not just the IC necessarily, but other, whether it's the White House or whoever, to come up with, and some of these things aren't popular. I get it. Like someone saying, hey, we're going to ban all Iranians from coming over here to study, or all Chinese kids coming over to study. I know some of these things are not popular, but we need to do something that's more government effort to really put a hit on their ability to collect. You go to any top university, their engineering programs are all full of these people, and most of them aren't spying. I get it. I have 2 Chinese adopted daughters, for crying out loud. I mean, my kids aren't spies. Um, but there are people among them. I had plenty of student cases over the years that we identified students that had been pitched by the MSS before they came over to the United States to study here. And so there is a threat there, and it needs to be more government-wide effort to working together. And I just don't know how serious some of these politicians take this stuff. I know it's politically charged. I get it, but it's got to be something that we got to take a little more serious. Otherwise, I don't think we'll ever get ahead of it.
I agree with you, Ken. I echo everything you just said, right? Bad guys are doing bad things all the time, and they don't stop. It's not 9 to 5 to them. They're out there, they're actively collecting right now as we're doing this podcast. And while our audience is out there listening, they're doing it right now. I do think the CI community, in its reactive nature of investigations, is caught flat footed. An incident happens and we respond. We lose because an incident happened. That's why I love operations. That's why I love collections. It's a proactive, aggressive approach to prevent bad people from doing bad things. Catch them before they actually conduct the activity. And I too agree with you, Ken. I think that there needs to be a whole government approach to counterintelligence. The services do counterintelligence differently. The Air Force from the Army, from the Navy, from the Coast Guard, pick an entity, right? And now we open it up to the IC. The Bureau does it different than the services, which does it different than the CIA, which does it different than NSA and NGA. And then you open it up a little bit further. The defense industry base, corporate America. You know how it was done within the banking industry, within tech companies. Nobody owns counterintelligence. I look at like the human craft. The CIA owns humans. I look at signals intelligence. The NSA owns the trade craft. They set the policy, they set the training standard. Nobody does this for counterintelligence. Now, through your experiences, Ken, when you've gone through and you've set a foundation of being a fantastic counterintelligence practitioner, you're now working with the Hill, you've worked NCSC, ODNI. Who owns and where should it sit counterintelligence in your perfect world?
I think whoever directs it IC wide needs to sit above everybody. And again, this is not going to sit well with a lot of bureau guys, but I mean, logically, it should reside, as far as direction and deciding, prioritizing what targets we need to, go after. I think it needs to sit at the IC level. Again, and again, that doesn't mean that, the different, executors, lose anything, but we need to be more synergized, using my old Leavenworth terminology, but, we need to be more bootlace, and working towards a common goal that some people at a very high level, with using great analytic tools, deciding, okay, this node here, we're going to eliminate that node, and by doing so, we're going to really put a hurt on them. and whether it's, eliminating EB-5 visa waiver to, running an op and neutralizing said, intelligence officer here, or limiting, foreign students here. Um, and those kinds of things. I think it needs to. I think in a perfect world, Jeremy, I think it needs to sit at the IC level, and again, I think that can be done without anybody, stepping on anybody's toes. It needs to be done thoughtfully, but we all know that there's a lot of guys, not just in the bureau, but even over at DoD. When I was at ODNI, we ran into a lot of guys over at the Pentagon that wanted nothing to do with that. And I just really, from a practical standpoint, I think it needs to go that way. But I don't know how serious the Secure Act is going to go. I don't know what kind of traction it's going to get. At this point, I hope we take a more serious look at it, because I think the stuff that's outlined in that Secure Act makes a lot of sense. And promoting, like you said, operations. A good operations will lead to identifying those penetrations and neutralizing them and taking them off the board. Right now, a lot of these espionage cases, uh, it's low hanging fruit. You're throwing a guy in jail for taking classified home, mishandling 793 charge. Um, okay, great. I mean, yeah, he broke the law. That's a bad thing, whatever. But it's really not. Those are empty statistics to me. I just don't. I don't really view those as huge wins. So yeah, at the community level is where I think it needs to reside. With CI, that we used to have the CI, the NCIX, right? And Bill Evanina, when I worked for him, he was the NCIX, but NCSC, 90% of the stuff, or 85%, I would say, of the stuff that goes on over at NCSC is all security. Very little CI. Needs to be the other way around. Needs to be the other way around, or separate. Security's good. That's awesome. Good stuff. There is overlap. I get it, but there's not enough emphasis on counterintelligence.
No, we all agree with that for sure. And you kind of brought up, that they're not necessarily big wins when we make arrests, right? And it becomes a game of whack-a-mole, and there's some utility to that. We need to arrest some people, right? But that's really only part of the pie. There's other parts of the pie that we need to employ against this threat. And like you said, operations, the ability to have strategic effects over the long term. It's maybe not as it's not something you can put on a PowerPoint slide and show real effect right away. And I think maybe that's part of the problem. An arrest is something you get to see up on television. You get to put your windbreaker on and get up in front of the television. That's great. But but there's other ways to attack this. And I think, having, and I agree with an IC led kind of national level effort, and some of the things that got in the way, of course, were, politics got into the way, and people afraid of losing funding and afraid of losing, personnel and some of those things. And I think we got to get over that. Somebody's got to figure it out. So whether the Secure Act, goes a long way, I think what it did primarily was got the conversation started about a national level effort. And I think that's of great value for everyone. So.
Yeah. I talked to, I have a good friend over at the HIPSI now, and we talk she used to work with me over at ODNI, and she's fantastic, and she's a huge proponent of counterintelligence and exactly the stuff we're talking about. She helped write some of that Secure Act stuff. And when I get back down to DC in another couple of weeks, I'm going to be meeting with her again to, try to get the skinny on where we're at on that. I'm really interested in seeing if that's going to charge ahead. I mean, they wrote the Secure Act, and then this stuff just sort of peters out and dies, and the conversation stops, and there's no, we really need we need lawmakers and policymakers, people over at the White House. I mean, very few people, when I was over going to meetings in the West Wing and over at the Eisenhower building, we would talk about CI with people, and every 4 years you get a whole new flock of people, right? They don't know what CI is. They have no clue what counterintelligence is all about. And so it's just another round of people you got to educate and try to explain to them the importance of counterintelligence and how important it is for us as a nation to have a very good counterintelligence service program to counter the threat. It's a challenge. It really is. I hope that'll change. But after, over 30 years watching this stuff, it makes you wonder, like, if we'll ever get there. There's indifference. They talk a big game, but it doesn't seem like a lot of times they follow it up with any concrete, permanent fixes to this stuff.
I agree with you, Ken. I look back at what happened after 9/11. The community came together. I think that they recognized the silos between the various entities wasn't working. The Joint Terrorism Task Force set up to fix that. And it's unfortunate, tragic event has to happen for these congressional leaders or administrative officials, our senior leaders within the government say we need to fix this after an incident. It might not be a popular decision right now to move forward with shutting those visas off for the threats that are most credible. But what's less popular? When a soldier deploys a piece of technology on the battlefield and it doesn't work because the adversary has inserted malicious code, malware, or something nefarious into a system, and it puts that soldier's life in danger. That's tragic, and I hope we can prevent that. Who doesn't care about badges and windbreakers? The foreign adversary. This is why I love that you spent a career in the offensive side, Ken. And I want to ask you a question about that, to the extent we can talk about. How did you get into that? And, what was the passion that you had to continue to endure? Because oftentimes the offensive side of counterintelligence, you don't get to see the work that you've got done. It takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I was on a TDY again with my good buddy Tom Ferguson, and we were staying over by Tyson's Corner, and we went over to that Barnes and Noble over there at the mall, and we were just bumming around, killing some time one evening. And of course, I'm in the history section, and I'm looking at some World War II stuff, and I see this book called The Double Cross System, and I pull it out, and I start flipping through it, and Tom's with me, and we're and like, this is exactly like what we should be doing, like, all the time. Like, there should be never a time where we're not trying to run offensive ops, and so we each bought a copy. I still have my original copy sitting behind me. There you go. Awesome. It's a great book, man. I tell you, Masterman he's the master. Because the first 100 pages is like a how-to guide on how to run DAs. And then the rest of the book, of course, is case studies pretty much, but those are important as well. But yeah, that's where I just it caught my imagination. And so we came back from that TDY and we told our boss, Don Lachey, like, we want to start running some of these things. And he's like, yeah, go for it. He goes, knock yourselves out, So he gave us the latitude to try to run some of this stuff. But that's where the trouble began, at least in the Bureau, because the Bureau can put together a great espionage case, no doubt about it. Once we figure out who the target is, they can throw everything they got at it, and put a case together they can take to court and be successful. But one thing that we do have trouble with is offensive stuff in the CI realm, because we don't have passage material. We don't own all that good stuff that the DoD has or Department of War has. And so that is where that interoperability kicks in. So, but when Tom and I got back, then I went to we used to have a DA in service at Quantico for CI agents to go to. And you go out to Quantico for a week. It was just a week-long class. You guys go to JCETA for, I forget how many weeks that class is, but it's a very long class. I wish the Bureau had something akin to it for CI people. But so I went to the DA in service, came back from that even more fired up. And from that day on, Tom and I, we spent a lot of our time, trolling around Chicagoland, looking get people either that had placement and access, or if they didn't, they had a good profile. Um, we could take them and sign them up and get them into access, or bump them up against, some intel officers in another field office, and try to run some ops. And that, yeah, but that's where I really got into this stuff. It caught my imagination because, when I was reading about, in the double cross system and Garbo and all those, Zigzag and all those great DAs of World War II, the thought that occurred to me was, and of course, not the entire deception of Fortitude, Operation Fortitude, didn't just include DAs. It, included a lot of other things, deceptions that were going on to, trick the Germans. But DAs played a role in that stuff. And I thought to myself, through double agentry and just with, furthering strategic deception operations, literally made Normandy a success, and saved thousands of our men's lives. And I thought, what a great technique, man. And so that's where I always wanted to take a DA up. But the thing is that, in peacetime, there's not a lot of interest. It's all dollars for docs. They just want to pass some stuff, get some white funds from an intelligence officer, maybe identify a guy. Okay, that's all good stuff. You identified this guy's a line, whatever guy. And you took some of their money and you passed them some documents, but it's not, but that's where the benefit ends. I mean, it's like, these operations need to lead to either great counterespionage stuff or strategic deception against the bad guys. That ain't happening. I mean, it might be going on DoD more, but as far as the bureau's a bit player in that. I mean, to them, and I'm not knocking my old organization. I love the FBI. I always will, but it's just trying to roll people up and put cuffs on them. And it's CI is way more than that. It's got to be way more than that. And if you're gonna call yourself a credible counterintelligence service, and so yeah, that double cross system changed my entire outlook on this work. It really just fired me up. And I got a whole library. I have Civil War behind me and espionage. That's all I got back here. Well, Revolution too, but I but espionage or counterintelligence is that book really changed my whole career path and interests when it came to CI. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're not alone in that. So we obviously are all very passionate about that aspect of counterintelligence. So, very interesting. So Ken, it's been already almost an hour, so we are
crazy.
Time flies when you have somebody on the horn who has so much experience and so much to talk about. But
yeah,
I do want to kind of ask one more question. So a lot of our listeners are operators, analysts, investigators, security leaders, people trying to protect missions. Looking back across your long career, what advice would you give to a young professional who wants to build a career that's credible in both national security and maybe even in the private sector? If you were giving out some sage advice, what would it be?
Well, I'd start out at a basic level, is get yourself read up on what's going on in the world. I taught before I went to DC. I was an adjunct teacher at Robert Morris University, and I taught intelligence studies. And one thing that really dawned on me is that a lot of these young people don't really know anything about what's gone on in the world in the last 20 years, let alone the last 100. So I would, whenever I talk to younger guys who are working in this stuff or wanting to get into it, it's like, you got to educate yourself. You got to read. I mean, a lot of these young people don't like reading nowadays. So definitely get yourself read up and knowing what's going on in the world and having an appreciation for how some of this stuff fits. I'm by no means an expert on the inner workings of Iran, China, wherever. I mean, I probably was better when I was on the job. I'm a little dated now, having not been in it for about almost 8 years now, but but I'm still dealing with these issues, so I still think about them a lot and I read a lot. But so yeah, reading is essential. You have to know what's going on in the world. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it all comes down to knowledge and education, and knowledge about what's going on. I really just, I really think, and you have to be willing to, put in the time. Like I said earlier, if you want to get into this work, you really got to, be willing to commit yourself to it and work it. Uh, it's not, it's not something that's reactive. It's proactive. So you got to get out there and shake those trees and see what falls out. 99% of the time, stuff doesn't go right, doesn't work. I can't tell you how many cases I worked that and it never went anywhere. I just shelved it and moved on to the next guy. That's just the nature of the business. Um, but and you were asking about what I would tell young or younger people or people wanting to get in. Well, the other part about it is like try to keep your nose clean. you know, a lot of these young people nowadays getting into I talk to they'd say they want to get in the FBI, and I ask them a very pointed question about their drug use, and I know this is sort of like maybe off the trail a little bit here, but a lot of them have done drugs, and that's a career, that's a killer. Um but yeah, I mean, it may not be as detailed as you might have been looking for on that, but I really, it all goes back to getting yourself educated and knowledge, and build up your knowledge base on what's going on in the world. I think that's so critical.
I agree,
And,
Ken.
and languages too. I mean, if you have the passion, try to learn a language. I told guys getting into the CI program in the Bureau, I told them, hey, yeah, Russia is obviously still an issue. We're still, every day, you guys just talked about it at the outset of our show here. But if you really want to like stake a flag in this business and be, and you're an American born dude, learn Chinese. Try to commit yourself to learning Mandarin if you can. And really immerse yourself in the whole world of China, because we know a lot about Russia. We know a lot about their IOs, but what we don't know is we don't know it. We still don't have a knowledge base remotely robust enough about China. We just don't. And the Bureau certainly didn't have it. So I would say, yeah, try to learn some language. I found that to be very helpful. I studied German, back, I was a Cold War guy. So, when I ran around Germany, they were still a thing, East Germany and so forth. But, so yeah, but as the years went on, I learned a little Farsi so I could interact with Iranians, not to have a debrief a guy in Farsi, but to break the ice with them. It goes a long way in developing those relationships and that rapport. And so I dabbled in that. I took some Mandarin as well, and so I thought that always helped a lot in trying to build rapport and being able to talk to people. Right? You got to be able to willing to talk to people. When I was in 902nd, I had an NCO work for me that told me, well, at Aberdeen Proving Ground. She told me, she was my NCOIC. She told me she didn't like talking to people. She was a CI MOS NCO. And I looked at her and I said, well, you're in the wrong business. I mean, I go, if you don't like talking to people, then maybe you ought to reclass into something else, but you're in the wrong line of work here. So be able to be comfortable with talking to people and be intellectually curious.
All
I think
sage advice, Ken. All sage
yeah,
advice. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. Thanks.
Hey, so Ken, if our audience wanted to pick your brain or follow up on any portions of the conversation, how could they reach out to you?
Well, they could hit me up. They could email me or call me. I can leave you my information, if anyone wants to reach out. Dave has my number, and you may have my email. Otherwise I'll send it to you if not. but I'd be happy to. I'm always happy to talk to anybody about this stuff, whether they're thinking about joining the Army, the Bureau, the CI world, whatever. I'm always excited to see young people, interested, because obviously the three of us are on the way out, right? We're the teachers now, or at least trying to impart what we've learned over our careers, but we need new blood. We need new guys stepping up, and guys and gals stepping up to carry on the mission. So I'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Yeah, you're up on LinkedIn as well, right? So there's some
Roger that. Yeah,
hit
yeah, I am actually. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and you're right. We need some new blood, and I tell you, we have an opportunity with IXN Solutions to do some training events. I can tell you, we're in good hands. We've been teaching for about 3 years now, and we've had quite a few,
That's
primarily
great.
Army students come through, and there's some rock stars out there. They're gonna do us proud. I promise you. So
Good. Hopefully, someone will join the Bureau.
yeah, that's a typical pathway, right? I mean, I almost did it as well when I was a captain. So
yeah.
Hey Ken, it's really been awesome. So it's been great catching up with you after so many years, and then
Yeah,
inviting you on.
likewise. Yeah, thanks for the reaching out. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and we're gonna wrap this baby up.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken, 3 decades of service. Thank you so much for your passion, your knowledge, and giving back to the community, and the proactive and aggressive nature you have. And I mean, it just exudes through the conversation. So truly, thank you for taking the time to share your story with our audience.
More than welcome. I appreciate the time, and it was a pleasure meeting you, Jeremy and Dave. Stay in touch, but guys, stay in touch. I'd love to continue the conversation.
I'm going to take you up on that the next time we're in DC. I'd love to share some beers with you. We could talk
I'm
about
not-
our friend John Nacella.
Well, we could talk about Nacelle a lot. There's a lot there.
That's
a lot
right.
of good things.
A
A
lot
lot of good things. John's a wonderful man.
Truth.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, another episode in the books. You want to start taking us out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, audience, if you've enjoyed today's episode and want deeper behind the scenes insight into counterintelligence and insider threat issues, check out our IXN Dispatch on Patreon. We share extended analysis, original content, and resources you won't find anywhere else. Also, to keep the conversation going, our Dispatch Central Discord is open to everyone, a place where CI and CI professionals connect and exchange perspectives beyond this episode. So both links will be put in our comments below. Jeremy, you got some more for us?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Another great episode. To our audience out there, if you did what I had to do over the weekend, my wife and I went through our closets. I got rid of all my gym clothes. So I had to jump on Printify and get some new shirts. So if you're looking for some CI swag, check out our Printify shop. If you have a topic you want the IXN team to cover, shoot it our way. If you want to be a guest, we can most certainly make that happen too. And as always, recognize an incident, react accordingly, and then report it. Thanks for giving us a listen, and until next time.